sacrifices and all that, because a lot of them don't even believe Satan is an entity. So there's variations in that as well.
Yes, it's quite a complex tapestry, isn't it, to pick apart. Yeah, so as you say, there is this very famous Church of Satan, isn't there, which the guy called Anton LaVey set up in the 1960s. And as far as I understand, they don't actually believe that Satan exists as a spiritual being, but he's sort of a symbol of self-indulgence and defiance, that kind of thing. I believe he wrote the Satanic Bible with that quote, "Do what thou wilt, that is the whole of the law." A horrible statement, but that kind of sums up that sort of scene, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I've known people who have been into that, and in actual fact, if you met them, you wouldn't in any way think they were an evil person. I met a young lady, she was just 16, into all of that, and she read that Bible, and she was a lovely girl, I have to say. There was nothing evil about her at all. Yeah, folks just don't often realise the roots and the real spirituality behind a lot of these teachings.
And yet, as you say, there is what you might call the theistic side of things, where people do actually believe that Satan is a spiritual being and revere him and look into magic and all that sort of thing. So there is that other side. As you say, with Luciferianism, there are these different flavours as well. So I understand there is a kind of a rationalistic version of that, where Lucifer is just a symbol, inner truth, self-development, liberation, that sort of thing. But that's not where you were at, was it? Yours was more sort of pantheistic, so Lucifer was this guiding spirit, the kind of top spirit, is that right? The top expression of the pantheistic reality, as far as you understood. Is that it?
Yeah, we believed the famous medium's explanation of him, Barbara Max Hubbard. She's still around today and she still talks about it as well. Really, that Lucifer is the god, as it were, that he descended from. I think it was Venus, and it was him who made the ultimate sacrifice to come here. And we didn't talk to Lucifer or pray to him or anything like that. As you say, we were far more interested in communicating with spirits, whether they be so-called ghosts or spirit guides. We were just aware that Lucifer was at the top of it, and we kind of ignored him, really. And we were more interested in seances or ghost hunts and so on.
Yeah. So you say that, I'm just trying to get some sort of picture of the theological landscape here with this. So you say that Lucifer was considered the one who'd come to the world to bring knowledge, salvation, in that sort of Gnostic sense. So Jesus presumably would have been one expression of that. And if that's the case, that's sort of flipping Judeo-Christianity on its head, isn't it?
Yeah, Jesus is just one of many, really, and basically he's really not that important, they would say. He was in the age of Pisces, and we're now in the age of Aquarius, which we're all much more spiritually evolved than that. That was their way of thinking, and that Christians were amongst a group of people who were very spiritually dull and very low on the evolutionary spiritual ladder, as it were, and that Christians were in actual fact holding up this age of light and utopia, because the Christians still thought Lucifer was Satan, so they were against things like, yoga, meditation, spirit communication, and really they were blocking some of Lucifer's light. And essentially that, in order for the world to reach this place of global peace and unity and harmony with our space brothers or our spirit guides, the Christians would have to leave the planet, whether by, aliens would take them away, or very much this sense of all of the Christians will be faced to have a choice, take the Luciferian pledge or die. People like Barbara Max Hubbard have even said that. It's in books, it's out there, so it's not just me saying this, it can be checked out.
Well, as it happens, Dr. Stanley Monteith, who was on this show a few years ago, said that he had read a book by Barbara Max Hubbard. I think it was the Book of Co-Creation, and he said he had an original copy of it, and that she had written something along the lines that you just described there, but that in later editions that portion of the text was excluded. So, I can't verify that myself, but that's what he said. So that connects with what you've said there.
Yes, basically, in the original text of her book, why she basically talked about how there is a quarter of the people who certainly will go along with the world government, and that's great. About half the people in the world really won't go along. They'll just sort of drift in and do whatever they're told. But there's a quarter of the world who will object to what's going on today and will try to fight it, and they're going to have to be destroyed. They're going to have to be killed. And then he goes on to say, but that is not your job, my dear. That is ours, for we are the riders of the pale horse, death. Those are exact words. I have a copy of the original manuscript. Now, when she published the book, why she took that out, the original book, of course, I have a copy of. When it was published for general consumption, they took that part out. They really don't want the public to realize they intend to kill off a large segment of the population of the world. Her words were, that is not your job, referring to killing the quarter of the population who will go along, and that's the Christians, of course. That is our job, my dear, for we are the riders of the pale horse, death. And you'll find that quotation in my book, Brotherhood of Darkness.
Did you get any of that kind of attitude from the Lucis Trust? Because you were reading a lot of information from that organisation, weren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And even from mediums and psychics that we knew who weren't involved in the Lucis Trust, they were just local, mediums and spiritualists, but they knew of all this teaching too, and very much it was a case of we believed in reincarnation, we believed in karma, and I remember initially when I heard that certain religious groups would have to be killed, the main group was Christian, although it wasn't the only group, but I remember at first thinking, oh man, that's terrible, but we were told, don't feel sorry for them, it's okay, they have to be removed, and they can be reincarnated, they can come back, and they can join with us next time, so, it's not as if their existence is completely over, that they may evolve and do better next time, and it's necessary for the planet that they are removed. And so all of these kind of teachings would have a rationale behind them that would seem to be sensible and would seem to make sense. So yeah, I did believe that.
I suppose the thing that confuses me about this is whether that's understood in an active sense or in a passive sense. What I mean is, did they believe that this had a sort of prophetic force to it, that as what they believed was the truth would gradually swallow up the whole world, according to their hope, that things would just work out that way, that Christians would either go along with it or they would just die out, or things would just happen? Or was it a case of actually looking forward to a time when some kind of action would be taken to remove people? Were they actually saying that?
Well, both in actual fact, because in these various movements that I've discussed, and certain witchcraft groups too, we basically felt that down through the centuries, this had been prophesied many times in different cultures, in different generations, that it was just a fact, it was definitely going to happen. And not only that, yes, it would happen because spirit guides and alien beings and so on would make it happen, and it would happen because whether it be weather events or something would happen that would just wipe out a lot of people. Yes, but we also felt it was also partly our responsibility too, and therefore we were always encouraged to basically, wherever you were at in your life, whether you were still at school or college or whatever your profession was, that you bring this message to other people. You encourage people to get into meditation, to get into yoga, to start contacting spirits, to open their chakras to higher realms and all of that. Now, not that you would necessarily run right out there and tell them Lucifer is God, that isn't the way to go about it, but to introduce them by any of these spiritualities under that Luciferian umbrella. Once a person gets into the New Age and gets involved in these things, they eventually find out themselves the teaching about Lucifer, and by then they're already hooked. Might be a little shock at first, but they just believe it. Because I did, when you're told by your leaders who are mediums that it's okay, Lucifer is an angel of light, he's not Satan, the Bible's wrong, well, you believe it, especially when you have these spirits turning up that are confirming it. Now, if you have a so-called spirit saying it's a spirit guide or saying it's your dead gran, and it even tells you this is true, then you will believe it because you just assume, well, here's a spirit being telling me it's true, it must be true then. Of course, what people don't realise is that these spirits do tell lies about Jesus. So it was an agenda, and we were taught to do that, in a sense of we were encouraged to do that, infiltrate any realm of society that we were in to bring forth this message. Now remember, we were thinking this was a good thing. We weren't doing it like others who are in darker forms of Luciferianism who were doing it and they knew it was evil. We did it thinking this was a really good thing to encourage society. And of course, 20 years later, I'm really seeing that in a big way now, just watching it happen worldwide. It's definitely mushroomed since those days when I was involved in it.
Yeah, and from your perspective, and my perspective as well, they tell lies that they're actually guiding dead relatives to communicate with you. I mean, at the time, you did actually believe that these mediums were channeling people who you knew, but you don't believe that anymore, do you?
No, basically because my mother and I began to hear through the grapevine that often mediums would get attacked by spirits. We used to read literature, even books by mediums written decades before. And this could be a phenomenon that would happen. And of course, it was explained away by saying, well, it's a hazard of the job. You are contacting the spirit world after all. Of course, you're going to get some nasty spirits coming through. Or if someone claimed that their actual spirit guide had attacked them or their actual dead relatives had attacked them, the explanation given would be, well, it's just because it's where you're at in your spiritual walk and there's some lessons you need to learn and they're just testing you to see how loyal you are to them and this type of thing. Or they would even say, well, you've got some bad karma, so you've attracted some low-level spirits. There was always a kind of explanation given for why this happened. But, we heard of mediums who would end up in psychiatric hospitals because of this. And sadly, that began to happen to us. The so-called spirit guides began to attack my mother and I, the so-called dead relatives. My mother, it was worse for her because she was more involved. As I say, I was at school and I wasn't as dedicated as her.
Well, why did they do that? I mean, it seems curious that they would do that if you were quite comfortable in the spiritualist church, doing all the things that you were taught and just rolling along. So why would they attack you? Because that would be to put you off, wouldn't it? And put you on another path towards a different spirituality. Why would they do that?
I suspect it's because they knew we were, in a sense, losing a certain amount of interest. And certainly since heard this is common for people. Yeah, exactly. If you're going along with it all and doing what they want, then they're not going to create a fuss. They're going to keep up their nice persona. But if you start to show an interest in other things or draw away from them, that is often when they do attack. Because, worldwide people sometimes contact me and say, I've never had any problem like that from my spirit guide. And I'll say to them, well, that's because you're doing what they want you to do. Right. Start to turn away from it and you will see that they probably will attack. And people have got back to me and said, yes, that's happened. And also just because I guess they're just evil and sometimes you just can't resist it. But, there's even famous mediums like, it was either Doris Stokes or Doris Collins, I can't remember which, back in the 80s, 90s, she did write in one of her books that her spirit guide sometimes attacked her and threw her across the room. And she just kind of accepted it. So
peculiar, isn't it?
Yeah, it is really, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at what point in this story here, I mean, you had a Catholic friend at one point who was giving you a warning, saying this really is not the thing to be involved with, although I get the impression that you thought it was a bit of a vague warning, but nevertheless it was a warning. Did that, do you think, trigger any of these attacks at all?
I think so. Plus, at high school, we were given the Gideon's Bible, and I was curious in anything, and I thought, I'd never read it before, I should probably read it. And I did actually say the prayer of salvation, the sinner's prayer. I remember that, although I didn't know how to follow up having a relationship with Jesus, but I did say the prayer, and I think that really annoyed the spirits and wanted them to put me off following Jesus.
Yes, they don't want you to find out who Jesus really is. Of course, that makes complete sense, yes. So your mother was very badly affected, very, very badly affected by these spirits. In your article that you wrote for Premiere, you say that your mother was thrown about, you went shopping, and you literally saw her being picked up and thrown onto the bonnet of a car. Now that's, when I read that, I think that is absolutely extraordinary. And I want to ask you, is that something that you believe is an event that happened in the sense that she was actually picked up, or is this something that affected her mind so that she sort of ran out into the road? I mean, how do you understand what happened?
Oh, she was actually picked up because we also had things happen in the house furniture moving and things being thrown.